Next, we'll be looking at two more exponent properties, one for zero exponents and one for negative exponents. For zero exponents, if you have any value raised to the zero power other than zero, then the solution is 1. So if you had something like a to the 0, you would get 1. If you had something like 2 to the 0, you would get 1. If you had negative 1/2 to the 0 power, you would get a solution of 1. If you do ever see something like 0 to the 0, then that is undefined. For negative exponents, there's kind of a 2-in-1 rule here. If you have something that looks like a to the negative m, so you have a base raised to a negative exponent, you're going to change that into 1 over a to the positive m, or if the negative exponent was in the bottom of a fraction to start, you would end up with something like this. So it's almost as if a negative exponent changes position. If the negative exponent is in the top of a fraction, then it moves to the bottom and becomes positive. If it's in the bottom, then it moves to the top and becomes positive. Let's try a few examples. So first here, we've got 2 raised to the negative 2. So this is a negative exponent. And you could think of this, I know it's not a fraction right now, but you could think of it as being over 1. So currently the negative exponent is in the top of the fraction. You're going to move it to the bottom of the fraction and make it positive. So we'd get 1/4. Remember, anything raised to the 0 power other than 0, and negative 2 is not 0, always equals 1. 5 to the negative x goes to the bottom of a fraction and becomes a positive. Now, for number 4, I would say you probably want to look at this as like a fraction in a fraction. So right now you've got 1/3 raised to the negative 1. So we would move that to the bottom of a fraction and make it a positive exponent. Now anything raised to the first power is just itself, so this is the same thing as 1 over 1/3. And then you'll remember from elementary school that you can't have fractions and fractions are really just the same thing as dividing. So this is like 1 divided by 1/3. And rather than dividing by a fraction, you change it into multiplying by the reciprocal. So 1/3 to the negative 1 equals 3. Here we have 0 to the negative 3. Remember, it goes to the bottom of the fraction and becomes a positive exponent. 0 cubed is 0. 1 divided by 0, remember, we don't divide by 0. That's undefined. So do make sure you think about, before you leave something like 0 cubed, make sure you think about what that really equals, because sometimes it might be undefined. Let's do one last example. This one's just a little bit trickier than what we did before. This is 2 times x to the negative 2 times y to the negative 3. You should think of this almost as 3 separate mini problems. The 2 part, the x part, and the y part. So the 2 part is just going to stay the same. But the x part, x to the negative 2, we know that's going to go to the bottom of a fraction and become positive. Same thing with the y to the negative 3. We know that's going to go to the bottom of a fraction and become positive. And when we multiply fractions, we know that we multiply straight across the numerators to get a new numerator, and we multiply straight across the denominators to get a new denominator. We can write 2 as 2 over 1 if that helps to see the fractions. So multiply our numerators. 2 times 1 times 1 equals 2. Multiply our denominators. 1 times x squared times y cubed is x squared y cubed. would be our final solution here.